welcome back to another episode of Bass Fishing for Noobs. I'm Susie Q.
Hey guys, it's Sean.
We got Sean back. We missed you, buddy.
It's good to be back. So,
yeah, good to hear. Good to hear. A couple of updates. We just finished off our Noobs tournament for July here. And, if I would have been a little bit more prepared, I would have already had that up. But I believe we had, was it the Alabama guy?
I looked at a little bit real quick. Scotty Wilson?
Yeah, what was his last name? My internet is failing me right now.
Whoops.
Come on. That's like everybody wants to log into TourneyX right now because it's spinning and it's spinning.
Scotty Wilson from Alabama.
Scotty Wilson, that's right. So I haven't made the official announcement on Facebook yet, but if he listens to this on Monday, Scotty Wilson, great job. You just punched your ticket to the Noobs Championship coming up in October. We should have more details coming up on that championship probably next month in September. So way to go. Keep grinding out there. And tomorrow starts for August. So I'm very curious to see what people are going to be putting up for those.
Yeah. No. I was looking at Scotty. Scotty's biggest fish is 21.75.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That was
nice.
A quarter of his total. Like just in one fish. I was like, dang. That's nice.
That was nice. I mean, he's from Alabama, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. I mean, down south states, yeah, they're usually pretty big. Big fish down south. You know, that's
cheaters. No.
Right. Oh, shoot. Well, today we've got an awesome special guest with us today. We have Mr. Frank, and hopefully I don't butcher your last name. Is it Sladek? Sladek?
You're close. It's Sladek.
Sladek. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's actually Czech for beer master.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Love it. Frank is from the Jake Wolf Memorial Fish Hatchery here in Illinois. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to let Frank introduce himself, maybe a little bit of history about you and kind of what you do and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Thanks for having me again. Thanks for reaching out. We always love doing different media platforms at the hatchery and, just expanding the reach of what we do. So, yeah, my name's Frank Sladek. I'm our natural resources coordinator at Jake Wolf Memorial Fish Hatchery in Topeka, Illinois, which is just south of Peoria, Illinois. And we are the largest state-run fish hatchery in Illinois. We raise over 15 species of fish each year, and between the three hatcheries that are run by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, we actually raise over 20 different species of fish, and we stock on average about 20 million fish in the state of Illinois every single year.
Wow.
As far as myself goes, I'm our natural resources coordinator at the hatchery. And it's my job to do public programming, including hatchery tours. I do school visits. I do scout programs. I also just do community events, fishing derbies. We had an event at Starved Rock last weekend that was really good, or this last weekend, I should say, and that was a good turnout. And then I also assist at the hatchery with some non-fish projects as well. We don't just raise fish at our hatchery. We also raise dragonflies, crayfish. We did raise freshwater mussels from the last couple of years. That program's kind of on hold right now, but we don't just raise fish. But yeah, my main duty is education and outreach. So that's why I love doing the media like this, is just because I get to talk a little bit and tell people what we do.
That sounds really cool. That sounds like a pretty sweet job.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, I've been doing environmental education now for about 18 years or so. Started my career as a fishing instructor up in Chicago. I grew up right outside the city in a town called Berwyn, Illinois, which some people may know. And if you don't know Berwyn, we are next to Cicero, Illinois, which I'm sure many people know. So, but yeah, I've been fishing since I could stand up, and I I've held many titles over my career. My background's in zoology, so I've worked with all different types of animals, but fish are definitely one of my favorite groups of animals, and I get to work with them every day.
Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool.
Super jealous.
If you knew how much cleaning at a hatchery was involved, you probably wouldn't be as jealous as you are.
As with most jobs, there's going to be the non-glamorous parts of it, right?
Yeah. Hey, you know what though? We have a great team, and I'll tell you, our staff, man, especially our technicians, are the backbone of a facility like that. And when you're having to keep tabs on over 1 million animals every single day, that's a lot of work. I always say our fish are good at 3 things: they're good at eating, swimming, and going to the bathroom. So.
What's the staff like there? Like, how many people does it take to manage that many fish?
Yeah, so believe it or not, we're a 160-acre facility in Sand Ridge State Forest. So we're surrounded by about 7,000 acres of state forest, and we only have a little over a dozen staff managing the
Wow.
property every single day. But we will be getting some new staff in the coming months. Full staffed, we're probably around 2 dozen people or so. But we've been managing, we've had some great summer interns. We've got our techs, we've got our managers, our culturist, and then, of course, myself to do the educational program. So, we've got a good team, and yeah, we make it work.
Very cool.
Awesome.
That's impressive for the amount of fish that you guys handle and other species too. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, I guess exactly what is the main purpose of, maybe not just your hatchery, but fish hatcheries in general, the main purpose, main goals, stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah. So, fish hatcheries, at least in Illinois, have been around for over 100 years now.
Wow.
And initially, what they were trying to do is actually replace fish that were lost through natural events. So I won't get too heavy in the names and everything, but basically what happened is there was teams of scientists at the turn of the century who were determining that there was loss in river systems due to waters receding after floods. So the backwaters, your oxbow lakes, your sloughs, areas like that, basically fish were getting trapped. And when the water dried up, you would lose those fish because obviously there's no water for them to be in. So what they determined is to compensate for those natural losses, fish hatcheries should be created to stock more fish into lakes. And in addition to that, another reason that hatcheries came about was to increase sport fishing opportunities for anglers. So, what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of the fish that we're catching in the state are stocked by the IDNR, and they're not naturally occurring fish, or even if they are, maybe their natural reproduction's not so good. So, there's many reasons why hatcheries exist, but if I could name the big 3, it would be for increasing sport fishing opportunities amongst anglers. It would also be to supplement wild populations for the reasons that I just mentioned and more, because there's a lot of areas where natural reproduction just isn't that good, or it's not even happening. And then the third reason, which is a little more recent, is conservation of endangered species. So we're not only trying to enhance angling opportunities for anglers like yourselves, but we're also helping wild populations by supplementing stock. And what we're also doing is conserving species, a couple of which we are raising this year. So those are really the big reasons why hatcheries exist. And this just isn't just on a state level, this is a federal level as well. We do partner with state and federal hatcheries in our efforts. So it's not just us doing this. We have a whole network throughout the United States.
That's awesome. A guest that I had on previously, he was a fish and marine biologist out of, my gosh, what state was that? One of the northeastern states. Oh gosh, I'm going to. Was it Delaware? Oh man, brain fart. It's a Monday. Anyway, he was telling me that, I don't know if you know much about this either, but how like a lot of the non-native fish got here is back, turn of the century, whatnot. They just shipped boxcars of fish and water and just threw them in lakes because they're like, oh, let's see what'll survive here in a sense. And I was like floored by that.
Oh yeah, I mean it was definitely not as, I don't even want to use the word sophisticated, because if you look at the way our trucks stock the fish, I mean, really, it's just fish getting shot out of a truck out of a big water pipe. Although there is a lot more that goes into it. And again, if any other DNR staff or anybody are going to watch this podcast, I'm not trying to downplay what we do, but you're absolutely right. 100 years ago, I mean, they were traveling with these fish by rail car, and a lot of the times they'd actually get the passengers to help to do water changes. And they just stock the fish sometimes, whatever lake or river was right next to the train tracks. So, yeah, I mean, they were stocking fish in areas that, may not have in modern age been deemed for stocking sites. But, again, this is 100 years ago. So, now you're seeing those populations of fish and more. But, we stock both native and non-native fish in what we do. So, and it's definitely more thought out process nowadays. Yeah. And that kind of goes into what we stock, it's not just, throw fish in any lake, pond, or river. Certain fish can only survive in certain areas. Perfect example is salmon in Lake Michigan. There's no other place in Illinois we're stocking salmon because they just wouldn't survive. But something like a largemouth bass, we could stock in every corner of the state, and they should do just fine. But there still is a lot of thought that goes into it. And it's a whole team that decides, what we're stocking, where we're stocking, and how much we're stocking every single year.
I'm sure there's a big balance that goes into that. Just, what species are going to be, more predatorial for the other species and, that kind of thing too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a good example of that is muskie. We stock muskie throughout the state, but the thing with muskie is that you can't stock very many of them because they are at the top of the food chain. Just to give you an idea of stocking numbers, usually when we're stocking muskie, it's one fish per surface acre. So if a lake's 500 acres, that's 500 young muskie that we're stocking. You don't really want to go over that because then you run the risk of overpopulating the lake, and that's not good for a fishery. So you kind of have to hit that sweet spot between overstocking and understocking. You have to hit that area in the middle. And if you do, you get great fisheries. But that's why, we have a whole team of biologists that do lake surveys, just like any state does. It's not just us. We have a whole team in fisheries that determines, what fish are being stocked and where they're being stocked.
Awesome.
I was always curious how you come up with how to stock a river because, like I live next to the Susquehanna and it's a mile wide and, huge. It runs, the whole state of Pennsylvania into New York and Maryland. And like, how do you say I want to put trout or bass here so I can catch bass, but who knows if the bass are going to stay where you put them or.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, there's a lot of factors that go into it. In my particular position, I don't really have any say in that. So that would be a question maybe for a future guest, maybe one of our biologists, or even just a biologist from another state. I mean, it's similar in every state. And there are differences, but I mean, again, it just boils down to, well, what can the system handle? Kind of where the population's at right now. What's our goal for this particular watershed or water body, and how can we get there? And we do adjust stocking levels each year, and some of these lakes are not stocked annually. It might be a biannual or triennial stocking where it might only happen every 2 or 3 years. But a lot of that depends on the species of fish, and again, what the biologists and our managers and our team want. And also just the state of the fisheries too. So like I said, I mean, we could have a whole just segment talking about that, but I know there's a lot more you guys want to know. So that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh man. Yeah. We need to have like 5 more episodes with you just to talk about some of the different things here. So kind of going back a little bit about, the different species of fish that you guys do manage and whatnot. So I'll kind of touch base on like the most popular one that people have been raving about. And then we can dive deep more into salmon and whatnot, because that's my favorite one.
Sure.
But you guys had just recently announced that you got in some sturgeon, which is totally mind-blowing and amazing. So, and I know that this is kind of relatively new area for you guys because you haven't had them in some years. So yeah, let's talk about them.
Yeah. So, the nice thing is, and I can't speak on this too much because, again, this is a species we haven't worked with in many, many years. But yeah, it's very exciting, anytime you work with a threatened or endangered species, because that's another thing that hatcheries are trying to do more of on both a state and federal level is, reintroduce these threatened and endangered species to our waterways. And lake sturgeon, are one of our largest native fish. So it was really exciting to get them. And it was also a little scary just because, it's been so long since we worked with them. But yeah, I mean, just a quick backstory. They came in from Neosho Federal Fish Hatchery in Missouri a couple weeks ago. They were actually born up in Wisconsin at Genoa, which is another federal hatchery. That's one of our partner groups. And they came in at about 2 inches long. I'm actually glad they came in a bit later than they did because we were going to feed them brine shrimp. And if you've never raised brine shrimp, it is a daily ordeal. So after a certain size, they get on bloodworms, just like you get at the pet store. So when they came in, they were just getting on bloodworms, which was good news because those are much easier to just thaw out a block of those and feed them out than to raise brine shrimp every day. But yeah, as far as stocking and everything goes, that's to be determined. And just raising them, basically it's just making sure they're healthy every day and that they're eating well and they're growing real nice. They're getting big old bellies on them. Sturgeon, are pretty slow growing fish, but they can grow pretty quickly in the early stages of life. But they've been fun to watch. They're like little sharks, and it's exciting to work with them. I've never worked with sturgeon before, so it's real exciting. And, just to see them that small and to think that they're going to be potentially a couple 100 pounds in the next few decades, it's exciting. But it's, sturgeon are like oak trees. They don't grow big overnight. So it's kind of a waiting game. So, I mean, I'm going to be an old man when these guys are huge. But, hopefully I make it that long to see them at that, 7-8 foot size and a few 100 pounds. That'd be really cool.
That would be really neat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where and I know some of this may still yet to be determined, but like, do you have any like focused areas that you plan to reach?
Again, we can't speak too much on that right now. Yeah. There are several departments that are involved. I've worked with endangered species of different types in the past, and there's a lot of layers that go into it. So again, I can't speak too much on it, but I would think, one of their native ranges or habitats in Illinois is the Mississippi River. Yep. So I would think that's going to be one of our main focuses, but I don't want to say too much just because that's yet to be determined. But, I would think the major rivers are definitely going to be a focus for us. And as far as anything else goes, yeah, I can't speak too much on that at this point.
Sure.
I know, I've read a little bit about sturgeon and stuff, and I remember reading like their skin is very like paper, almost like paper thin, or you have to be careful when you're handling them. Is that like an extra challenge, or how does that work with? Is that one of your more fragile species, or
believe it or not, no.
Okay.
Sturgeon actually. So I won't get too heavy into the science, but they're actually covered in a primitive scale, and gar have the same type of scale. It actually is covered in a substance or contains a substance that's similar to tooth enamel. So what gives so that's what gives them that hard outer surface and makes them armor plated. Okay. Just like gar and bowfin as well. So those are, that's the same type of scale. But as far as sensitivity goes, when any fish is young like this, you have to be careful with diet. You have to be careful with monitoring water quality and everything else. I always say that a fish hatchery is very similar to preschool, like we're preschool for fish, because, the bigger the fish get and the better fitness they have, the better chance they have at surviving. But when they're young like this, a lot of species are fragile. But as far as the sturgeon go within the species we raise, I wouldn't say they're our most difficult by far. Okay. Believe it or not, one of our hardest species, two come to mind right away. muskie, and largemouth bass, believe it or not.
Really
Yeah,
interesting.
and a lot of that has to do with muskie. I again, I wish I had more time to talk about this, but just to give you an idea, muskie are not the brightest fish, um, and they also can be prone to different diseases, and they cannibalize. So that's the other thing is largemouth bass are the same way. Is they can stress out, and anytime you get stress, you can get illness or disease. And the other thing with bass is they love to eat each other. So, sturgeon, that's not a problem. And even our other fish like salmon and trout, we don't have to worry about cannibalism. But the bass and the muskie, oh, they're horrible. So,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of effort to raise, especially a fish like a muskie. But the sturgeon really haven't been too bad. Mostly it's just getting them on feed. And once you get them on a feeding regimen and make sure the water's clean, it's been pretty straightforward with those little guys.
Neat.
Yep.
That's really cool. Just a couple more questions about the sturgeon. So, what size pools or whatnot are needed for them, like at this current size? And then, like, are you going to have to move them to like bigger containers? As they get bigger, like,
Yeah.
how do you manage all that?
Yeah, so that's something we have to do with the fish pretty consistently. Is we do have to split them into smaller groups as they grow. So the sturgeon are in what's called circ tanks, basically just short for circular tanks. They're these big green tanks we have. I couldn't tell you how many gallons they are, but basically the nice thing about our facility is that we have constant water flow. We sit on top of an aquifer, so we have cold, clean water coming into the hatchery every single day of the year. We just have to oxygenate it or aerate it before it gets to the fish. But for cold water and cool water fish, it's great because you really don't have to do anything to the water as long as the flow's steady. There's clean water coming in every second of the day for these fish. But sturgeon do like to swim too, so that's important to keep that flow on them. And then as far as splitting them, I don't know how long we're going to keep them, but I would assume we're probably going to have to grade them out or split them into smaller groups. Some of the fish we actually have to split by size class because of what I mentioned before with the cannibalize or the cannibalization where they eat each other. Like bass, we have to split them pretty consistently because if you leave the big ones with the small ones, you end up with just a few big ones and no small ones. In fact, there's another species we're raising this year that we haven't had in a few years, which are alligator gar. And, with the cannibalization and just the grading or splitting those fish, it's very important for species like that too, because right now we've got fish that are 10 weeks old, and we've got some that are 4 inches long, and we've got some that are 15 inches long, and they're the same age. So you have to stay on top of splitting them so they don't eat each other. But with the sturgeon, that's not a problem. But as far as, splitting them into smaller groups, we do that as size dictates. And, if they get too big for their tank, we'll split them into smaller groups or we'll move them into bigger housing. But to be honest with you, I'm not sure how long we're even going to keep the sturgeon for. Standard size for us, as far as stocking goes, is what's called fingerling size. So about size your index finger. Although we do raise some fish to be larger than that, and we do release some fish at fry stage, so when they're really small. But standard for our facility is usually fingerling size for most species, so in that like 4 to 6 or 7 inch range.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, John.
I was just going to ask, can you run down the species real quick? You said 15?
Oh, that we raise?
Yeah.
Oh man, let's see here. So Jake Wolf, we do the most species, and I always compare us. It's we do a lot of kids programs, so this is kind of a comparison I like to use. But our facility is like Goldilocks and the Three Bears because we raise warm, cool, and cold water fish. So some fish like it hot, some fish like it cold, some fish like it just right. So as far as the cold water fish go, I might have to use my hands here, but let's see. We raise Chinook or king salmon. We raise coho salmon. We raise brown trout, steelhead, rainbow trout. So that's 5. We raise smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, black crappie. Let's see here. Hybrid stripers. alligator gar, so that's 10. Oh man, northern pike muskie, that's 12. Oh man, you're putting me on the spot here. I got 3 more to go. We do also release walleye as well.
Okay.
So that's 13. And then we also do, oh man, I know I'm forgetting something here. Oh my god, oh my lord.
Perch?
Of course, the lake sturgeon, which we're not counting as a species yet because we don't
Okay.
every year. And again, because of their status, we're not really going to talk too much about those. And there's 2 more that I'm blanking on, and I'm going to kick myself when I remember them. But as far as other species in the Illinois system, we also do channel catfish, blue catfish, red-eared sunfish, bluegill, and sauger, sawguy.
Mm-hmm.
And then, oh my lord, there's one that I'm missing, but I believe that was 19 or 20 right there. So yeah, a lot of
Very
different
cool.
species.
Yeah.
As far as cold water goes, the only thing we don't raise is lake trout. And then as far as like the warm water species, we don't do flathead catfish. Like I said, we do both species of bass. We do black crappie. A lot of people ask us about like paddlefish or spoonbills. We don't currently do those, but that might be something in the future. We used to do tiger muskie. We used to do pure striper instead of the hybrids, but those are species we don't currently do at this time. But yeah, I think I nailed pretty much all of them.
Well, that's very cool, and I'm sure there's all sorts of science that goes into how many you release, how many of those you think will survive, and that kind of thing. I just think that would be really cool, and do you track them in any way, or like any of them to see how many or okay, we put this one in here and we think it will survive, or we know it survived.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, this is something, since we were talking about hatcheries nationwide versus just Illinois, a lot of hatcheries mark their fish in different ways. So one of the ways we mark our fish is actually we raise a species called black-nosed crappie, and they're actually just black crappie with a line down their face. It looks like somebody took a Sharpie and just drew on their forehead and their chins. Now we don't do that at Jake Wolf, but we do actually breed them so they're born with that stripe, and that's a way to identify them when they leave the hatchery, and that is a naturally occurring thing. But as far as us doing something to the fish before they get released, common practice is, especially with salmon, is to clip one of the fins off, and that actually identifies them as a hatchery fish. Now, I'm sure Susie knows this because she's caught Chinook and coho up in Lake Michigan, but a lot of those fish will be missing what's called their adipose fin, which is near their tail, and it's just it looks like a little skin tag. And we actually clipped that off. Now, for many years, we did that by hand, but Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, actually has several trailers that do it through a machine. Yeah, they have these multi-million-dollar trailers that can knock out tens of thousands of fish in an afternoon.
Wow.
And the fish are under for the procedures, so they're not feeling anything. But basically, you do that fin clip, and if you catch one of those fish in the wild and it is missing one of their fins, especially that adipose fin, that shows that fish came from a hatchery and was not born in the wild. Now, the reason we do that is, and you kind of touched on this already, is we actually do that to track wild populations versus captive reared or hatchery-born fish. And the reason we do that is because, let's say, in the Great Lakes, for example, if you catch mostly salmon that have that fin, that's showing you that there's natural reproduction going on. However, if most of the fish you're catching do not have that adipose fin, that shows or basically there's not a lot of natural reproduction going on. And in the Chicagoland area, that's true because, there's nowhere for the salmon to spawn, and the Chicago River does not count. So, but that's the reason we mark the fish, is to track wild populations and kind of see what our return rates are. And it's not just us that does that. It's, hatcheries all over the nation. They can also tag fish for various reasons, for studies, whether it be harvest, maybe they're doing radio tracking. They might do what's called a pit tag, where it's a tag that's shaped like a pill, and they can run a scanner over it to see the last time they captured that fish. We do that with our alligator gar here in the state in some areas. So, I mean, there's different ways to do that. It's not just us, but yeah, there's definitely ways to mark the fish before we release them.
Cool.
Yeah, I've definitely I've caught some smallmouth up in northern Wisconsin that'll have like a like almost like a tag, like a kind of long skinny tag with numbers on it, and it's yellow and it's kind of like up by their middle dorsal fin. So I've caught a few different ones that I'm like, what is this?
Yeah, and it's the thing about those you mentioned is that some of these tags, like they call them spaghetti tags or Floyd tags. What you're referring to, it looks like a colorful noodle hanging off the fish.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of those have phone numbers that you can actually call a biologist and actually get some more information on the study, but also report your catch. So that's something to keep in mind for any anglers that are listening, is that if you catch those fish, look for a phone number on the tag, and you can call the biologist and see what the study's about, and also just report your catch, and they can get some data, whatever it is, on that particular species, which is really cool.
That is pretty cool. I'll have to remember that because I'm going to be going up to northern Wisconsin again the end of August. So if I catch one of those, I'll have to look for a phone number.
So there's another tag, just real quick, that a lot of people wouldn't know about because it's actually in the fish's head or nose. It's a wire tag that they put in trout, and they can put it in other species too. But what that wire tag is, it's about the size of a human hair, and it goes in the fish's nose. And if you look at it under a microscope, it actually has a series of letters and numbers, a code, and that'll tell you where the fish is from and what year it was born. So Jake Wolf has its own batch tags for the trout that we tagged this year. And some of those fish might be captured in Michigan or Wisconsin, far from home. So that's another reason we track, is to look at kind of where they've gone or where they're captured.
That's pretty cool, that they could travel that far. Yeah, that's really neat.
Oh, yeah.
When so the salmon fishing tournament that we host in Manitowoc, Wisconsin DNR usually likes to come out for the award ceremony, because that's when everybody lines up their catch. We measure them or whatnot, and then they will take them, and then they'll do like measurements and whatnot, and then they'll scan their heads looking for like the little wire tags inside. And like when I first saw them doing that, I was like, what are you guys doing? And then they told me, I was like, that's amazing. It's awesome what they can do and what they can track.
So those people do have a name. They call them headhunters.
Nice. But yeah, it was really cool. And I think like over the couple of years, I mean, they'll usually get, quite a few scans in there with the fish that come in. And we've caught not as many like wild Chinook in Lake Michigan, but majority of what we catch are the stock, because they're missing the clipped fins in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to what I said earlier. That's just helping us look at recruitment and, survivorship, and also just see how wild populations are doing. But, that's one of the reasons we stock, is to just supplement those wild stocks. Or if there's no recruitment, you need fish to take the place of the ones that might be passing away, or just enhance the fishery. We do that with muskie here in Illinois, muskie are a stocked fish. From what we've seen, there's really not natural recruitment here in Illinois. So if you catch a muskie in Illinois, it came from us. It came from Jake Wolf.
I was going to say, there's probably quite a few populations of fish that you guys are pretty much the only reason they're still around,
Yeah, and I could, and that's something when we give tours of the facility or when I'm doing programs. I mean, usually I'll list off a list of fish that people might have caught, and all the fish I list off are fish we stock every year. And I don't think a lot of anglers realize that. And again, this isn't just Illinois. This is on a national level. I don't think anglers realize how many fish are actually stocked into the waterways in their state.
Right. Yeah. Hence why, having you on here, because I'm sure, relatively new anglers, not really going back into history or whatnot, really check into, the finer details of, okay, well, what is a natural fish for this body of water that I'm fishing at? Are these stocked fish? Do these, fish, do they reproduce on their own, or are they, supplemented by a hatchery? So it's very fascinating to learn all this information as an angler myself.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers that go into it, like I said. So I mean, it's pretty mind-boggling, just the history and kind of how we've come to where we're at. But yeah, I mean, I think we do great work, and it's always nice to see the anglers catching the fish that we raised. So
And where does your funding come from?
yeah, so a lot of our funding actually comes from fishing license sales in the state of Illinois. So that's the great part too, is that the anglers who are buying their licenses, which everybody should, um, make sure to buy your license if you haven't. So that's just a little PSA. But you know, I I don't think, again, that's something a lot of anglers realize, is that those license sales are going right back to our division, and right back to keeping the hatcheries operating. And then also we do get some federal funds as well, but fishing license sales definitely make up a big portion of it. And there's, like I said, there's other funds involved as well. But that's the great thing about doing what we do, is that we can see the results of what the anglers are catching and the fish that we're stocking, and it comes right back to us, so we can keep doing it every single year, which is great. And actually, our hatchery, we just celebrated our 40th year anniversary, so that's pretty exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah, we've
Yeah,
been doing this for
congrats.
quite some time. So
And that's very cool. I mean, it is like a great big cycle, and I think if more folks realize that they wouldn't feel as oh man, I got to go buy my license again, when they realize that a majority of the fish that they catch are coming directly from they're funding their own sport, and that'll help if more people realize that. I think it would help grow the sport, and it would help everybody around, and just keep that cycle going. It just seems like it's sad that people don't always know that or realize that. So
yeah, and Illinois is a lot of anglers. One of the programs we do to really get back to the anglers is the inland trout program. So we stock catchable rainbows twice a year, in the spring and the fall. So those are the rainbows that, they're definitely not shaped like steelhead. They are domestic, so I call them chickens with fins. But if you've ever caught if you've ever caught a stocked rainbow, that's a species that the state stocks. And the rainbows, we call them catchables because they're at the size where you could actually catch them, take them home, and make a meal out of them if you'd like. But that's a huge thing. I mean, I grew up just outside Chicago, and some of the forest preserve lakes where we'd stock these fish, I mean, you'd see a couple hundred cars on opening weekend.
oh yeah.
But it's a great way to get anglers involved, and not just kids. I mean, people of all ages. One of the great things about fishing is that it's an extremely accessible sport, and it's inclusive. You could be any age, race, ethnicity, religion, or skill level and still go fishing. And that's, the inland trout program is a good example of that, because you can go out and catch a trout dinner, even with limited skills. So
Yep.
And do you guys take volunteers at all for you? Because I know here in Pennsylvania, like they take volunteers for fish stocking and stuff. But like, you can actually volunteer and go help. Take buckets of trout out, and they'll obviously, they don't just give you a trout and be like, here, go to this creek. But you can go and help them. It's very cool.
yeah, so as far as volunteering goes, unfortunately, we have pretty limited opportunities at this time. We get quite a few requests for volunteering. As far as driving the trucks and stocking the fish, it's a little bit difficult because some of our sites require a CDL because of the size
Gotcha.
of the vehicles we're
Yeah,
driving.
that makes sense.
And then also, there's as far as opportunities go, it can be kind of boom or bust sometimes. Like, one time in the early spring, for example, we're harvesting and spawning muskie and pike, but that only lasts for maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks.
Right.
And really, we usually have enough hands at the hatchery that we don't need assistance. Fin clipping is another example. Most of that's automated now, although we do still have Salmon Unlimited from Chicago come down and do it by hand. And they're still very efficient with the speed that they can clip these fish. I mean, we had, oh God, probably a couple dozen volunteers at the hatchery this spring, and they knocked out almost 100,000 fish in half a day.
Wow.
So I mean, they were
Wow.
just, so they were just clipping like crazy. So yeah, I mean, unfortunately, volunteering is limited at this time, but it's something we're exploring for future seasons, just because we do get a lot of requests.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. Well, I know you have a little bit of limited time. Was there any other topics that you wanted to cover?
Yeah, I've got about 20 minutes or so left. I'd love to talk longer. As I told Susie, I'm at the local library right now, using one of their conference rooms just because it's nice and quiet in here. And the internet connection is awesome. So, um, oh God. I know Susie wanted to cover kind of salmon and trout up in Lake
Yeah.
Michigan. So we can maybe touch on that because, again, I'm a South Sider. So I grew up fishing for salmon and trout and yellow perch on Lake Michigan, too. That's something that I love fishing for. And that is some of the species that we stock at Jake Wolf are the cold waters, your salmon and your trout. So, just to kind of give you an idea, this year we stocked just under 500,000 salmon in the Chicagoland area. That includes the coho and the Chinook. And then we just finished up stocking brown trout in several of the harbors in July. And then we'll be stocking steelhead in September. And we're going to have to wait for the water temps to come down before we do that, just because it can't be too hot. And a lot of that is just waiting for the winds to cooperate. And then those temperatures tank. Again, if anybody's fished the Great Lakes know, it can go from high 60s to low 50s in a matter of a couple days. And that's when you want to get those fish in. But yeah, we've been stocking salmon and trout for decades in Lake Michigan. And those are introduced fish. They're non-native. But, for anybody who's fished the Great Lakes, you could go to the center of the country, the Midwest, and you can catch trophy salmon and trout. And I have almost fought people on this, but I still am under the impression and belief that we have some of the biggest, if not the biggest, brown trout in the world in the Great Lakes. I mean, I can't think of any other place you can have a shot at a 30-pound brown. I mean, there's some absolute horses. And those are our fish,
cool,
too, which is, not just Illinois, but those are other states' fish that we're stocking. So, I mean, it's awesome to see these trophy fish coming out of the Great Lakes. And even just catching the Chinook in the fall run or catching coho in the spring. I mean, that was an annual tradition for me and my friends when we were growing up and in college. We'd go hit the coho run in March and April, and then we'd hit the Chinook, end of August, September, and we'd be fishing right next to Soldier Field, where the Bears play. So
wow,
it's pretty cool. You can catch fish from shore like that.
exactly, and mainly due to the hatcheries and what you guys do right now. I mean, that's what makes that possible.
Absolutely, yeah. And there is some, like I said, there are some big fish in Lake Michigan. I caught my personal best brown trout right behind the Adler Planetarium, which is, again, right downtown Chicago. It was on a homemade hair jig of all things and 6-pound test. So
Nice.
yeah, so that was a bit sketchy, but managed to get him in and take a picture and release, and that was a beautiful fish. But yeah, I mean, we do work all over the state, but we definitely get more recognition for like the salmon and trout program up in Lake Michigan for sure.
What's the logistics involved with getting the fish that far? Because I mean, I'm sure they're not close.
Well, we basically have trucks with big metal tanks on the back. We load them up with water. We have oxygen bottles on the tanks. What we do is we actually weigh out the fish to get a count on how many we have. So, it's similar to if you go to the grocery store, we do weigh fish by the pound, but then we actually count out the individual fish in a pound. Our trucks can only handle so many pounds of fish, so you don't want to put too many. But also you have to keep in mind that different harbors in the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan, or even just different stocking sites throughout the state have quotas, or stocking requests that we have to meet. So, if they ask for 10,000 trout, we're not going to put 50,000 trout in there. We're going to put the 10,000, and that's going to be it for the site. But, we load up the trucks. We get on the road early in the morning. We do have oxygen, again, on those tanks. So we measure oxygen levels, and we have meters that actually do that for us. And going from central Illinois, even up to Chicago, a short trip is maybe 4.5 hours, even for the South Side harbors. And that's because you're stopping every hour to check oxygen levels. You're checking the health of the fish. Hopefully you don't get a flat tire, which hasn't happened in my time there, but again, it can happen. So you want to make sure to get those fish in the lake in a timely manner. But even when we get to the lake, we're checking oxygen levels, we're checking water temps, we're making sure conditions are right. So those fish that we worked so hard to raise, for the last half year or so, are going in healthy and they're going in clean. We don't want any hiccups. So there's a lot that goes into it too, but it's fun to watch them go in because again, you just hook up a pipe to the back of the truck. And it's like a big water slide for the fish. And I should mention with fish like salmon, we do stock them near the back of the harbors just because it helps them kind of make an internal GPS point so they can go back to those harbors where we stock them. Just like they would return to their home rivers in the wild, so it's that internal waypoint where you're finding those fish going back to those same harbors once they're ready to spawn.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very cool.
It's really cool. Yep.
Interesting. I was going to ask you, so like, what kind of mortality rate do you guys experience with, certain types of fish? I know you were talking about like the cannibalism, with large.
Yeah, don't even get me started on the bass. Oh my god! So that's why we collect more eggs than we need because you're always going to lose some. Now that's not to say that we're killing a lot of fish, but what I'm trying to get at is that you're going to lose some no matter what, even with your best efforts. But that's just how fish are built. That's why they have so many eggs. That's why they have so many offspring. When you're a baby fish, you have a big target on your back. Pretty much anything and everything, including your own brothers and sisters, want to make a meal out of you. So, you have to be cognizant of that, or you have to keep that in mind when you're raising these fish, is that you're going to lose some, there's going to be some loss. But what I do want to say is that, what a lot of anglers don't realize too, is that in the wild, there's a lot of populations that you get less than 1% return rate. So if a fish has 10,000 eggs, for example, less than 100 of those are going to make it to adult size. Whereas in a hatchery, we might start with 1 million eggs and still end up with 500,000 fish when all said and done. So, you're getting 50% or more return rate on those fish. But again, they're in ideal conditions. They have clean water. There's no predators besides each other, and maybe some, birds once in a while, which we control those too. That'll be for a different episode, but the survival rate really is much higher than it is in the wild. And that kind of goes back to my analogy earlier, the preschool for fish, is that, we're getting them to a big enough size where really you're not seeing as much loss and not nearly as much as you would see in wild populations.
Right.
Because it's not just predators getting them. Sometimes even just some strong wind can blow an entire nest of eggs up on the shore and they wouldn't even hatch. So, there's a lot of factors that go into it. But our survival rate is much higher, and depending on the species, I mean, you could see anywhere from, 50% upwards of even 80% or higher in some fish, which is awesome. So, but you can have bad years too, but that's why we partner with other hatcheries too, is that, if something does happen, let's say we get a bad batch of eggs, we can make calls to other hatcheries in other states and get the eggs or the baby fish that we need to meet our quotas, so it's good to have those partner groups if you need them. And even if you don't, it's good to talk shop with them and see how everybody's caring for their fish,
Interesting. So what would technically just make like a bad batch of eggs, just like they just didn't all get fertilized or the way they came in,
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it can be, the age of the fish has to do with it. Usually the older the fish, the less viability you get on the eggs. So you do want those kind of mid-aged fish to younger fish because you might not get as many eggs as, say, a really big female fish, but you're getting better return because they're in the prime of their lives, so to speak. And you do see a drop off after certain ages, but there could also be fungus. If you're fertilizing eggs, maybe the fertilization didn't take. I mean, there's a lot of different factors. So it's not just one thing, but, there are times you can lose eggs or you can lose fish, but there's ways to remedy that. We do medicate if we need to. with the eggs. You can always get eggs from other hatcheries because most states have surplus unless they're having a really bad year too. But, there's not too many times we have to rely on that. But it does happen. The system's not perfect, and they're still animals at the end of the day.
Right.
And how do you guys get the eggs? Like, what does that look like? It's not just an Amazon box, right?
No, it's funny you say that though. So there's three main ways we get eggs at our facility. One way is we actually have biologists and some of our staff go out and actually set nets. We'll collect fish like pike and muskie in the early spring, right after ice out for pike. They spawn early, and muskie aren't too far after. But we'll actually have nets set, and we'll bring those adult fish back to the hatchery. We'll physically remove the eggs from the females. They are alive. We're not killing them to remove the eggs. We do release them back into the lake, but we also do that with pike as well, and we fertilize them right on site. So we do it right there with our staff. It's a big event. The public always comes. As far as tours, we're booked solid that week because everybody wants to see muskie being baby muskie being basically brought into the world, which is really cool. But that's one way is we can go out and catch adult fish and bring them back to the hatchery. We also have thousands of adult fish like bass living on site. We can actually harvest eggs from them. We have nest boxes that we set out, and then they lay their eggs on the nest boxes. It's basically mesh window screen in a metal box, and we lift it out and we bring the eggs inside to incubate. If we let them spawn out in the ponds, we probably wouldn't have many babies left just because they'd eat each other. But that's another way. And, you mentioned Amazon. Strangely enough, we actually do get eggs shipped in the mail. Okay. So there's days in the fall when we're doing salmon and trout. Not salmon because our staff usually goes up and gets them from Michigan or Wisconsin. But like trout, for example, I'll be given a tour or I'll be downstairs in our production rooms. I'll get a knock on the door. UPS man hands me a box and there's 500,000 trout eggs in there. So
wow,
you can get them shipped in the mail. Yeah. The cool thing about that is that usually when they come in, they're eyed, meaning that you can see the little baby fish inside and you just see an eye looking back at you. It's really, really cool. And usually those eggs hatch within a couple days to a week of them arriving. But yeah, those are the main ways we get eggs. And again, we can get them shipped or even brought in from other states if, we have an issue.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I joked about that, my daughter's 8th grade science class raised brook trout, and that's how they got them. And I remember joking with their science teacher that he got an Amazon package of brook trout eggs. And
I always say that we get them in the mail, but I encourage our tour groups and our guests to not try that at home, especially if you're not home very often. You don't want just fish eggs laying on your front porch. That would be bad. So,
well, very cool.
Oh my gosh!
So, out of all the fish you raise, what's your favorite? Do you have a favorite?
Oh man, I would say out of the fish we raise, I would say northern pike are one of my favorite. They take to food pretty well, and they're beautiful little fish when they hatch out and as you watch them grow. Alligator gar are my favorite just because, they kind of get bad reputation and it's undeserved. I can't get into all the reasons why, but I've worked with gar for years. And if you ever watch them in a tank, unless they're feeding, they are one of the laziest fish. I mean, they are just like sausages with fins. They are just super. They're cool though. I like them. And then I really like our salmon. But I think I'm biased because I grew up near Lake Michigan. But it's neat to watch them grow up and get stocked, and then see them take off in the lake. And you think to yourself when you see them get shot into the harbors, you think, I'm going to see you in a couple years when you're 20 pounds. Yeah. So that's pretty exciting too. But those are my favorites. Least favorite, I would say, are probably muskie just because they're pretty hard to care for. And largemouth bass, just because, like I said, they could be real finicky and they just love to eat each other. So
I guess that's the reason why there's baby bass color lures.
Absolutely. Yeah. Baby bass is a great color in spring, and it's no coincidence why. So
that's funny.
Eating machines. That's awesome. Yeah. Oh gosh. Anything else that you wanted to touch on?
I wish we had more time. I'm just
I
looking
know.
at the clock here. Library will be closing here in a few minutes, so I would say
Well,
just
yeah. Where can folks find more about you, or like?
yeah. So
That's a
that's
good.
actually, I think, a good way to wrap up, at least for this session. I mean, I'd love to be back if you'd have me. This has been great. Yeah. So, yeah, as far as where you can find us, Facebook, we do have Jake Wolf Fish Hatchery, and you can find us on Facebook. Right now, our profile photo is some baby alligator gar. And we have a cover photo of some lake sturgeon. So it should be pretty easy to find us. But we also have our website, which is iFish Illinois. And iFish Illinois has updates on your favorite bodies of water, what we're stocking in them, and kind of how the fish populations are doing, and also public access information. And that's updated by our state biologist regularly. And again, that's iFish Illinois. And then Jake Wolf Fish Hatchery on Facebook. And then if you ever want to visit us, again, we're about half an hour south of Pekin, Illinois, and we're about an hour south of Peoria. We're also about an hour from Springfield, Illinois, and about 3 hours from Chicago. But we offer tours throughout the year. Just give us a call or shoot me an email. All that information's on iFish and our Facebook page. Tours are free of charge, and we offer them throughout the year. If you wanted to see trout and salmon hatching, fall and winter are a great time to come. Right now, we're getting in fish for the state fair. So tomorrow, our interns will be out in the boat catching probably 5-foot long alligator gar for the state fair. We got in some sturgeon and some other fish from the Mississippi today. So really exciting. But those are the best places to find us. And if you had any questions about our local fisheries, our fisheries biologist information is also on that iFish website. You could find their email addresses and phone numbers if you had questions about your local bodies of water. Otherwise, yeah, I encourage anybody who's in the area to come down and visit us, or at least check out our Facebook page to see all the cool stuff that we do. And as word gets out about us, we hope to do more media broadcasts like this to get the word out about what our hatcheries do and all the benefits that we create for Illinois anglers.
Well, very
Awesome.
cool. So, well, thanks for what you guys do to keep us doing what we love to do. We probably would not be doing near what we do without the help of you guys. So
Yeah, and I always say without the anglers, we wouldn't exist either. So thank you for your contributions. Thank you for getting the word out about us and everything else that you guys do. It really is a mutual relationship. One can't exist without the other. So it's great to talk about what we do, and it's great to see what you guys do. I had a great time tonight. So
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you back on. So
yeah, this was a lot of fun. So looking forward to the broadcast, and yeah, hopefully I'll be back. But if you guys need anything else, you feel free to contact me. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.
All
Awesome.
right. Well, Susie, you want me to wrap it up?
If you want to, you can. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Bass Fishing for Noobs here on the Paddle and Fin podcast, where we bring you the techniques, the tricks, and the tips to help you rip more lips. You guys have a good night.
All right.